Well, good morning, and what a way to start off our Sunday. This is the Lord's Day, and this is the day the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. And I really do want to thank Brandon and Katie and the team for helping usher us into that, to rejoice and be glad in it, absolutely. As somebody that has no musical talent, but really does value musical worship and how that can open my heart to the Lord and working in my life, I am so grateful. I've also checked every time to be sure that my mic is off during worship, because that would be an unpleasant experience for everyone.
Yeah.
But I can't believe this is our last time together. It's been such a great weekend, and the sun is coming out. Look how beautiful.
Yes.
So, but thank you for sharing your weekend with us. We don't take that for granted.
Hey, just a quick reminder, if the talk on spiritual battle, if you want to hear more about that, they're actually re-airing an episode Noreen and I did 2021.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're re-airing it on Focus on the Family on Monday. So feel free to check that out for an interview.
But hey, we are going to talk about this morning, changing the climate of your marriage, one conversation at a time. I'm wondering, probably at least one of you, before you came here, who checked the weather for the weekend? I hope one of you did, or you might have ended up pretty wet, right?
Yep.
So you want to go like, what is it like at Mount Hermon usually this time of year? And then also, what's it going to be like specifically this weekend? So obviously we found out that it was going to be raining most of the weekend. We tried to pack appropriate clothes. So there's a climate here that you need to be aware of. In order to take advantage and not be kind of miserable, you want to be aware of the climate. What are we dealing with? And therefore, how do we equip ourselves to adapt to the climate? So probably like a lot of you, we went skydiving on our honeymoon. Anybody else? No? Okay, we did.
It was Noreen's idea.
I had always wanted to go skydiving. It used to be advertised where I went to school, and I thought that would be such a fun thing. So go ahead.
So Noreen goes to me, let's take some of our wedding money and go skydiving. Now, men, what am I supposed to say at that point? No, honey, that frightens me. So it's like we're up in the airplane. It's crazy.
Yeah. So, and we did what's called static line. So that picture is not us, but that is static line. It is not tandem. We weren't attached to somebody who was going to do all the work and you go for the ride. We actually had to do the work, jump out of the plane. Yep. That line is actually what deploys the chute, hopefully, but you spend most of the day, and this is crazy now as I think about it, we spent 8 hours, that's it, 8 hours preparing to do that, and then to control our own chute all the way down. You jump out, you present to the wind. I still remember, you check right, check left, make sure your chute is working, stall, make sure it stalls, and if it doesn't, if it's tangled or it's not working, you have to release your chute and deploy your backup chute. We didn't have to do that. But that's what we spent the whole day working on. So around 4:30, 5 o'clock, we were in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And I don't know if you're familiar with that climate, but very often in the afternoon, do you know what happens thunderstorms roll in off the mountains. So we've spent all day planning this jump, and the jump master comes in and says, we have thunderstorms coming in, and it's too dangerous. We can't let you go up. Yeah. So that at that point, it's like you have to adapt to the climate. It would have been silly for us, stupid, dangerous, to say, no, we're just going to plow through. It doesn't matter. Thankfully, they did give us the option of coming back the next morning. They gave us two options: get our money back.
And I'm like, Lord, you're so faithful. You are sovereign over the weather. Thank you so much.
Or come back the next morning and jump. And so we got to come back the next morning and jump.
We did. Our youngest son, Jeremy, takes after me. He does triathlons. No. And why are you laughing?
Sorry.
Honey, that was hurtful. He does triathlons. And so we went to one of his triathlons, and he had to wear a wetsuit because the water was so cold that you just couldn't do it bare skin. He had to adapt to the climate. His very first one, it was rainy and made the bike kind of treacherous a little bit. But he had to adapt to the climate. What we want to argue this morning is that you have a communication climate to your marriage. You can either ignore it or you can work with it and strengthen it and improve it. Yeah. So that's what we want to talk about today is because, oh, go ahead.
It's there.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it. Yes,
So
thank you.
communication climate is the overarching sense of value or satisfaction individuals feel as they interact with each other and go about their daily activities. So it's just kind of what surrounds you and what you have to work with. It's basically made up of 4 elements, and that's going to be expectations, acknowledgement, trust, and commitment. So those are just like 4 categories that fall within here that we're going to talk about this morning, and kind of a way that you can use to evaluate what your comm climate is like.
So as a communication professor, if you were to say, okay, you have 40 minutes, you have one shot at talking about how to improve communication between individuals, I'm going to talk about communication climate. Because if the climate is strong in your marriage in those 4 areas, then I think talking about finances, sexual intimacy, different philosophy of parenting is going to go well. If the climate is not strong, it'd be like going for a run and the heat index is 115. Can you run in 115? Yeah, of course. It's just not going to go particularly well. So the first thing we do is we improve the communication climate as much as we can. It'll never be perfect, but we want to improve it as much as possible to have these conversations. So let's talk about the very first one, and that is expectations that you carry right into the relationship. Expectations you didn't even know you had, but then you realize, oh, I did expect the husband to do this. I did expect my wife to do that. We learned this really early on because Noreen's dad is a Mr. Fix-It kind of guy. I am not. I'm spectacularly not. So one time Noreen said early in the marriage, honey, the van won't start. I looked at her and I said, bummer. Yeah. Right? I was a theater major. I was a theater major. But that was the beginning of thinking, oh, there might be some differences here in our expectations.
That's why I love the Shakespeare quote.
Yeah. Expectation is the root of all heartache, is when an expectation isn't being met.
So let's take a look at kind of a way to categorize expectations. Because a lot of times you hear about realistic expectations and unrealistic expectations. We have spoken expectations and unspoken expectations. But what does it look like when we put those together? Because when there's a gap between expectations and reality, what you end up with is a disappointment and discouragement, maybe anger, frustration. So here's the thing, you either need to adjust reality or adjust your expectations to try to minimize that gap a little bit. So let's take a look at the next slide. This is what you want to, your target area is going to be spoken and realistic.
Right.
Can we put the next slide? There we go, okay? So that's your happy place, right? You've expressed your expectations and they're realistic, like your spouse can do that. So for me to say to Tim, I expect you to fix the van, that doesn't fit into the target, does it, right? Because that's not a realistic expectation. Yeah. If it is unrealistic and spoken, so I say to Tim, I expect you to fix the van, well, we need to do some maybe compromise there or adaptation. And he can say, well, what if I make an appointment with the mechanic and we can get it fixed, right? That. So we want to close that gap between reality and expectation. Now, the problem is when they are unspoken or unrealistic. And the thing is with expectations, generally you don't know that you have an expectation till it's not met. And you're like, oh, why do I feel something about that? Why am I disappointed in my spouse? Our first year married, we got married in May. Tim's birthday is in January. Yeah. And I did not realize that his expectation was that his birthday card would be on the breakfast table the morning of his birthday.
It's called a birthday.
Yes.
A birthday, yes.
My family, we always celebrated birthdays around dinner time. So we'd have a special dinner, and that's when the cake would come out, and the presents, and the cards, and gifts, whatever. It was always around dinner time. So that was just my norm. That was my default. So the morning of his birthday...
I wake up, Noreen's not home. I wake up, there's nothing. I think, wow, she's really mad about the van. No, I'm thinking, wow, No, there's nothing.
Yeah.
My wife forgot my
He thought I
birthday.
forgot it.
Wow.
And then I was out like trying to make up for it at
And
that
it really
time.
bugged me. It really bugged me until we had.
Yeah, but it never came up at premarital counseling.
Right, yeah.
Like nobody ever said, how do you expect your birthday card on your birthday? Like
Yeah.
there are things you just don't know until you bump up against them.
Yeah.
But that was a pretty simple fix. It was unspoken, but it was realistic. So simple communication generally there can move you up into that happy place, the target. Your danger zone is when they are unrealistic and unspoken.
Yeah.
So I expect him to fix the van, and I just live in frustration because he doesn't. And even if I speak it, it's not realistic. So that's your danger area that you want to avoid is unspoken and unrealistic. That one's going to take a little bit more work to move it into one of the more manageable quadrants.
And obviously that applies to last night's talk on sexual intimacy, because we could carry into the marriage a ton of expectations about frequency, and things like that, but we don't really talk about it because we don't feel like we need to talk about it. Like if I go away for a trip, ministering, and I come back, of course we're going to reconnect. Right now, what that word means is different expectations, right? So that kind of a thing is, but all that is like,
trying to close the gap.
Trying to close the gap. So how do you evaluate expectations? Do I feel free to voice expectations in the relationship? Next, what unspoken expectations do I have that are being unmet? And I'm kind of maybe stewing about it, thinking I shouldn't have to talk about birthday cards. There's one right way to do it.
Yeah, anytime, yeah.
Yeah.
But anytime you find yourself, that's kind of one of those flag moments. When you find yourself saying or thinking, I shouldn't have to say.
Yes, yeah,
Or
yeah,
he should just know.
yeah.
She should just know. That means you have an unspoken expectation. So that can be one of those things you're like, oh, I'm going to pay attention to that, maybe formulate that thought and actually express it.
And then the last one is, how much of my expectations is being influenced by unrealistic standards?
Yeah.
That could be from family of origin, right? That's the van right there is Noreen's dad's amazing, but that's being carried into the marriage. Rom-coms.
Yeah.
University of London did a study on rom-coms. How much do rom-coms affect Americans' attitudes towards love? And found out that it really does. We have these weird expectations of what romantic love would look like, fostered by different movies.
Yeah. So the next part of the calm climate we want to talk about is acknowledgement. And acknowledgement is any indication or attempt to recognize the presence and perspective of a person. So if you notice, acknowledgement doesn't mean that you have the same thoughts, the same beliefs, but that we can acknowledge, we can put effort into understanding the other person's perspective.
Which is Gottman's quote. Remember, we already mentioned it. A person cannot receive advice until they first feel understood. So you acknowledge the weight of my perspective, and then you can disagree with it. But at least acknowledge this is a pretty serious. You don't have to adopt it, right? So how do we evaluate acknowledgement? First, do I feel effort is being put into understanding my perspective? So is Noreen really working to understand where I'm coming from when it comes to finances or different kind of, and that's the whole backstory kind of thing. One of the reasons I'm a spender is we grew up with not much money. Our parents hid it from us that we did not have money. You know what tipped it off? And we got glasses very early. I have two older brothers, and they were broke all the time because we wrestled all the time. So every school picture, my glasses were like this with duct tape. And we were like, why did you let me get a picture like that? My mom was like, we couldn't fix these glasses. We didn't have money to fix it, and we told you to take them off. So that's one of the reasons I'm a spender, is I don't want to say no to my kids, because my dad had to say no to a ton of things. So, and that doesn't mean Noreen has to agree with my wanting to be a spender, but to understand, like, oh, okay, I see where you're coming from is great. Are there views met with empathy rather than detached neutrality? Now, this is a huge one. Initially, emotions are not right or wrong. They just are. So I need to match your emotion. Like if you really, really are upset about this, I may be thinking, wow, that's an overreaction to that. But that is not going to help. That is detached neutrality. I need to at least acknowledge you're upset about this, and this really means a lot. If we don't do that, it's going to weaken the climate. And then last, do I feel acknowledgement is the goal, or is agreement necessary? Am I mostly trying to persuade Noreen, or am I trying to understand and acknowledge her perspective? I think you can do both. But I think acknowledgement needs to come first, or you're going to become defensive pretty quick.
Because you may never feel the same way your spouse feels about something. Yep. Like, for example, sorry to bring this up, last night the Detroit Red Wings lost, and that means they're out of the playoffs for sure.
How many years in a row?
10.
Yeah, I love that you know that.
Somebody else knew that. 10 years in a row.
I love that you knew that.
To me, that, like, 'cause honestly, sorry.
Stop it.
No, I mean, I love the Red Wings because you love the Red Wings. I didn't know a lot about hockey when we got married. And I think I could have led a very full and meaningful life without ever learning a lot about hockey. But it's important to him. And so I've kind of stepped into that. And so I know as the game was getting out of control and the empty net goal was scored and their season was over, that he was actually feeling something deeply about that.
Talking to one of my best friends
who
from
also
Detroit.
feels deeply about it. But so just acknowledging that, of just not being like, oh, just grow up. But I want to acknowledge, like, this is really important to you, right?
It really is. When
it
you're
really
from
is.
Detroit,
it is.
It's a life of pain and sorrow.
So even if I don't feel it, but what I'm saying is I don't feel it as deeply as you do, but I acknowledge that you feel it deeply, and that's genuine.
That actually means a lot to me. You either get it with sports or you don't get it with sports. Like you get it, you don't get it. Like Michigan, Ohio State, that is good versus evil. That is biblical. Okay, I digress. Okay, but I really appreciate that you know about hockey.
Yes.
Who's the best captain we've ever had? He might not be
and
he's probably a crummy GM.
He's not a good GM.
He's not a good GM. We need to get rid of him. Don't hire an I digress. Okay, here we go. All right, how to acknowledge.
Let's talk about how to acknowledge. Yeah.
Yes, let's talk about sex. That was last night. All right, let the other person know. Let the other person know that what you said made an impression on me. Does not mean I necessarily agree with it, but you have given me pause to think about it. Mm-hmm. We're not seeing that today in the national discourse.
You've given insight into why that's important to you.
And you brought up points that maybe ultimately I'm not going to completely buy, but in the moment, wow, I need to think about that.
Right.
So give me time to actually think about what you said, because that was a really, really good point. Next, let the other person know you are working to understand his or her feelings. I really do want to understand. I'm not there yet, so help me understand the backstory. And then lastly, let the other person know that his or her feelings matter. If this is a big deal to you, it's a big deal to me. Because you care about it, I care about it. Which is the hockey thing.
It's the hockey thing.
Absolutely.
All right, the next area of the climate we want to look at is trust. So trust is built through positive interactions and shared experiences and leads to feeling safe and respected. And if you've ever had a breach of trust in your marriage, you know how important trust is. Trust is kind of that safety net that makes everything else feel secure. You can handle a lot of rockiness and turmoil when trust is deeply built in your marriage.
Yeah, so we believe as communication theorists, if we're ranking these, we're saying that maybe trust is the most important one. Because of what Mahatma Gandhi said. Gandhi said this: the moment there's suspicion about a person's motives, everything he does becomes tainted. Like, if I don't trust you, I don't trust you. I don't think you're telling me the truth. I think you're spinning the truth. I think you're hiding things from me. I don't think you're being honest with me. One of our kids, we have 3 great adult sons, but we caught one of them in a lie. And just so happened there had been a birthday party, so there were some balloons around. And I said, hey, blow up that balloon for me. So he blew up the balloon. I said, okay, now let go of it. And it went, psh, psh. I said, that was our trust in you, and now it's gone. But here's the good news. Here's the good news. You can blow it back up. Yeah. You can blow it back up. So for now, no sleepovers, no anything like that. And you can blow it back up. So he did. And so then it was about like 3, 4, 5 months. I said, hey, guess what? The balloon's back up. Don't blow it again. don't lie to us. Some of you, the air has been let out of the balloon, and you, quite frankly, do not trust each other. I think Tom Ferris would say the climate will not improve if there's not trust. So this is going to have to be an honest conversation. You're going to have to sit down. You're going to have to say, listen, I love you. I'm committed to you. In this area, I don't know if I trust you. Now, that might be horribly unfair, and the other person might feel like, that's way too big a reaction to that. But you're going to have to talk that one out.
Yeah. So let's look at how we can evaluate trust. Here are some of the questions that you can just ask yourself, ask your spouse. What does my spouse do that makes it easy for me to trust them?
Yeah.
Like, what are the habits, whether it's checking in, it might be sharing passwords, it might be answering questions in a very open and honest way. Those are things that help you go, okay, I don't even need to give this a second thought. As opposed to, you say to your spouse, hey, where are you heading? Oh, out. Well, like out where? So if there's
Outside.
a lot of, vague or secretive, like you were saying, secretive, that's going to undermine trust. The next thing you can ask is, are there topics about which I suspect my spouse is being less than truthful? Are there some areas where maybe their answers seem secretive, or they're overly private or overly vague? And those are areas that need to be, again, brought to the light, because sometimes it's just habit, family of origin, like, oh, I'm just not used to sharing a lot of details, but if that's important to you, I can do that, as opposed to that they're actually trying to hide something, so you don't want to misinterpret things.
And then the last one, it really applies to us, because when you speak on marriage publicly, this one comes into play big time. Are the values promoted in public the ones you actually live out in private? So, we speak together often. Sometimes I speak, Noreen's in the audience listening to me. And I remember one time we were walking to the car after Noreen had listened to me all weekend on marriage. And I took her hand and said, hey, I'm really sorry I do like half of everything I said up there. And Noreen's response was, half? Half? It was a joke.
Kidding.
That was
kidding.
a joke. And now
kidding.
that's the joke in our marriages.
Yeah,
half. Take her hand. That's our job.
Yes, that's my job.
That's our joke. And then half, because we realize it's hard to live it all out.
Right, but what makes that work is that I know that Tim still believes and aspires to that. Even if we don't perfectly live it out, if we don't execute it as well as we would like all the time, those are still things that we are working toward, and still things that we believe in deeply, as opposed to what this is saying, which is, he talks a good game, and then we get home and he ignores me, and I try to bring things up and he's like, get over it. Like those kind of things where it's not about perfection, because we're not going to get there, but it's about patterns. So are there patterns that allow me to trust that the things that you say are what you really believe, because you live them out?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Thank you. Communication climate, commitment.
Yep, last one we're going to look at.
That's a huge one.
It is. So commitment is a pledge to continually do or be something in the future. So consistency is really important for commitment. Right? It's that underlying safety net where you just go, I know you're committed because you consistently show that to me. Where you can lose it here is like if there are threats of divorce, something goes wrong and the first language that comes out of your mouth is, we should get a divorce. I don't know if we're going to survive this. Yeah. If there's a lot of, remember we talked the first night about contract and covenant? If there's a lot of contract type talk, the 50-50, like, hey, I'm doing my part, why aren't you doing your part? And you've often said the person that says they'll meet you halfway is a poor judge of distance. Yeah. Right? So, I think I'm doing 80%, you're only doing 20. It's like, so if there's a lot of conditional or contractual language, that can undermine that sense of commitment.
And let's just say, again, I mentioned this before, that theologians can disagree on this. So we are not saying that in a Christian marriage, there are no grounds for divorce. It is hotly debated, We think generally Jesus gives one, that is adultery. That doesn't mean you have to get a divorce. It means Jesus opened the door. The second one from Paul is abandonment, right? You have been literally abandoned by that person. Then I think theologians like Wayne Grudem has added a third one, which I'm really grateful, and that is physical abuse, emotional abuse.
Which you would say is abandonment.
Is abandonment. Not physically, the person hasn't left the home, but they've abandoned the covenant. And so, ladies, nobody expects you to be a punching bag. Nobody expects abuse. God certainly doesn't. And does it happen women to men? Yeah, but it only accounts for roughly 6-7% of what happens in the United States. So just know, God isn't saying stay in this marriage forever. There's never, but it is to be done very rarely with much guidance from the church. So just know that God is aware there are certain situations that could be at play. But generally speaking, are you secure in the marriage? Right. Do you believe we're in this for life? That's a Christian marriage.
And that's why I love what Julia Wood said. She said, the hallmark of commitment is the assumption of a future. Mm-hmm. And so even like if you think back to the clip from The Office where Jim leans into Pam and he goes like, I know this is weird, but let's keep working on it. Yeah. That's the assumption of a future. It's saying this isn't going to break us. We're going to keep working on it. We're going to be together. So
evaluating commitment's really important. Does conflict cause me to worry the relationship is unstable? Right? You got to be able to have conflict. John Gottman would say, if you have conflict, he can save the marriage. Gottman would say, people who no longer care enough to argue, he said that marriage could be in danger. Next, do we agree that we generally put in similar amount of effort into the relationship? Are we both working on this marriage? Or do I feel like I'm putting in all the effort? And then last, am I too consumed by this relationship? Mm-hmm. Right?
This might sound like a weird thing to say at a marriage weekend.
But your identity is in Christ. I mean, he is the primary way that your self-esteem is built. Yeah. Not whether your kids are super successful, not whether you have kids, not whether your marriage is one that you speak at marriage retreats. No, our self-esteem is built on Jesus. And that means that the marriage doesn't define us, even though it's obviously one of the most important things about us.
It's the most important human relationship, but it is not your complete identity. And then if we can get the marital truce slide up. So one of the things that we've talked about is what does it look like to take a truce? And so here's the definition. The decision to temporarily, that's a really important word, temporarily set aside controversial issues and overlook the offensive actions of each other as you seek to strengthen the overall climate of your marriage. So this isn't avoidance, because it's temporary, but it's acknowledging things might be a little bit rocky. We might need to step back from this one issue to take some time to strengthen the overall climate so we then can come back to the issue and get to some real resolution. Just go ahead.
Yeah, this is why this is a tough spot for a couple to be in, because couples will come up to us and say, every time we talk about finances, we get into a blowout argument. And I want to say, okay, don't talk about finances. Take a break from talking about the kids' schedule. Why? You just said to me, every time we talk about this issue, it's this. Remember the old joke? Guy goes to a doctor and says, doctor, every time I raise my arm, it hurts. The doctor says, don't raise your arm. Right? Now, if we avoided that forever, that would be bad for the marriage. But right now, the climate will not support this kind of conversation. So this is trench warfare, right? World War I, trench warfare. Nobody moved out of their trenches the entire war. So we need to pull back, strengthen the entire climate, and then start to have conversations about this one issue. If that goes on forever and you avoid sexual intimacy, that's not good. But right now, it is not helping you to have this conversation. It's actually going sideways.
Yeah, and let's go back just to the abuse thing again. So this is not, again, we're not ignoring. We are consciously agreeing to set something aside, and abuse is something you never ignore. Yep. Right, that you cannot set that aside. So anytime power or fear is used as a threat or as a motivation or for control, that is abuse. That is not to be ignored. We're talking about the normal kind of day-to-day things where you're both committed to the relationship, you have good intentions toward the marriage, not evil intentions toward the other. Abuse is something that needs to be interrupted and probably brought into a bigger circle, because the cycle of abuse tends to continue unless there's some kind of intervention. Yep. And so that's where you're going to want to bring in trusted friends, pastors who will support you in getting some help so that abuse cycle can be stopped. And when the track record is set of better behavior, better attitudes, lack of abuse, then you can begin to work toward reconciliation. But the important thing is to get out, to get help, so there can be some kind of reconciliation.
Okay, so 2 scenarios. One, you both agree we're not going to talk about it, but the other person talks about it. They don't follow on the truth. They start to throw zingers in, or you think talking about finances is really detrimental, thus I'm not going to bite on it. You do whatever you want. I'm not engaging in this conversation. Now, the book of Proverbs is fascinating about how it rewards overlooking an offense. So the other person may not follow through on the truth you do. Take a look at these verses. They're fascinating from the book of Proverbs. A fool shows his annoyance at once, but a prudent man overlooks an insult. So even if your spouse throws in a zinger, a wise man has the spiritual ability to overlook that.
The next one says, a man finds joy in giving an apt reply, and how good is a timely word.
Right.
So if it's the truth, you've set it aside, you can just set that aside for a moment.
When you say something in the book of Proverbs is just as important as what you actually say. And then the last one would be a man's wisdom gives him patience. It is his glory to overlook an offense. So again, we're going to follow through on the truth even if you don't follow through on the truth, because the climate has to build and improve before we can have productive conversations. Okay, let's close with this. Everything we have said applies to God. Everything. You have a communication climate with God. We could take every one of those. Do you feel God acknowledges you? Or do you feel your prayers hit the ceiling and they don't go any higher than the ceiling? Do you feel God is committed to you, right? Or do you feel like you can trust God? Again, God knows the answers to every single one of these questions. So why do we pray? It's good for you to hear yourself, right? So remember, 45% of the Psalms are Psalms of lament, where the psalmist is saying, I don't know if I trust you because of what happened yesterday. We got destroyed in battle, and I don't know if you're committed to us. So again, every single one of these, we go before God and we ask the questions. Do I feel like you acknowledge me? Do I feel like I can trust you? How's the commitment level? And what are my expectations of you, God, in today's crazy world? Now, what we're going to do right now is we're going to address one of those aspects between you and God, and that is the commitment part. One of the beautiful things about the cross is that's God's answer to the question, am I committed? I get that I do things that confuse you. I get that sometimes my timetable is not your timetable. But let's nip this one in the bud. The reason you know I'm committed to you is not because you're healthy right now. It's not because your kids are healthy. The reason you know I'm committed to you is not your bank account, is that I sent Jesus to die for you. There is no greater thing I could have done to communicate to you that I'm committed to you than giving you my son. So when it comes to the commitment part of the climate, we step back and say, yeah, I might be questioning other parts of the climate, but when God gave us Jesus, that settled whether he was committed to us. That's why the taking of the Lord's Supper is so important. Calvin said, every time the church opens its doors, we should have communion, because we should observe the giving of his body and blood for us. So I think it's great that Stephen's going to come up and lead us in communion. As we evaluate our climate with God, we know that he's committed to us. So Stephen, why don't you come on up?